How can I maximize the business value and get the best price when selling?
Years ago, it once said, I'll give you any price you want as long as I get to name the terms. If I get the right terms, the price is going to take care of itself. Sell your business to your employees. Your employees already know about the business. I call it the magic valuation formula. The equation is simply cash flow times 1 plus your growth rate divided by required rate of return minus your growth rate, or otherwise known as the capitalization rate.
What's the approach to negotiating a business sale? How do I get the other side on board?
I think negotiation comes down to two things.
What are the key factors that will increase the value of my business?
It's all about risk. De-risk it. The key risk lies in the founder. Great example, just look at Starbucks. A lot of people don't consider the option of just hiring somebody to run it for them. If you hire the right CEO, it's going to make you more money.
When is the perfect time to sell a business, and how do I know?
I think the best time to sell your business is when...
If you're thinking about selling your small business, but you're not sure where to start, if you're wondering how much your business is really worth and when's the best time to sell it, if you want a step-by-step roadmap for maximizing your sale, you've come to the right place. Because in this episode, we're joined by Mike Blake, a 20-year veteran and expert in business valuation. Mike's not only a former investment banker, he's also started his own successful appraisal company in Europe, thanks to an unexpected twist involving his wife. By the end of this episode, you'll learn exactly how to value your business, find the right buyer, and negotiate a deal that could make your sale more profitable than you've ever imagined. We'll also uncover the surprising strategies for increasing your business worth before selling and the key mistakes to avoid when closing a deal. So stick around because you're about to discover insider tips that could make the difference between a good sale and a great one. Mike, first of all, welcome and thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to a fun conversation.
We're going to move to 10 relevant questions about selling a business, maximizing value, and planning an exit that have been picked by entrepreneurs and business owners. Are you excited?
I'm excited. Let's roll, man.
All right. So let's move on to some ground floor questions to lay out the foundation before getting to the details of a potential sale. So, let me ask you, what are the main reasons that make people usually tend to want to sell their businesses? And what are the actual reasons to sell a business, in your opinion?
So I think most of the time, somebody sells a business because they're tired of it for some reason. They could be tired of it because maybe they don't run it that well, and the business kind of runs them. And it runs you ragged. You and I have both been business owners. We've both, I can't speak for you, but I've been in that seat. When the business runs you, you feel like a slave to it.
I'm in that seat right now.
Yeah, and I am too, because I'm starting a new one as well, right, and internationally. So that's tiring. And after a number of years, somebody says, you know what, I don't want to do it anymore. I can't do it anymore. Sometimes they sell a business opportunistically. Now, if you have a business of any size and success, you're going to start getting phone calls from investment bankers, usually a first-year analyst or an intern that's dialing for dollars. And they'll call you up and say, hey, we think we have some people that would like to buy your business. Would you be interested in selling? Mm-hmm. And 99% of the time, the answer says no, hangs up on them, doesn't answer the email, whatever. But you get that owner on the right day at the right time, and they say, you know what, maybe I am interested. Right? There's a friend of mine once said, I'm happy where I am, but I've got ears.
Yeah.
And you sort of find yourself starting down that process.
All right. Is there another big reason?
Yeah. A big reason can sometimes be a forced sale. Sometimes you have to sell a business because you're in debt. Either the business is in debt or you're personally in debt. One of the biggest drivers of selling a business is a divorce. And, divorce is, I would not wish it on my worst enemy. Divorce is a financially catastrophic event, full stop, right? Unless you're a multi-billionaire and you've got really solid prenups, it's a disaster. And very few businesses survive a divorce. Or it could just be, a personal bankruptcy. You made some other investments that didn't work out. The bank comes a-calling and you got to sell the business to pay off your debt. Sometimes you have to sell your business because you got bad tax advice, and the IRS will force you to sell your business in order to come up Well, forced to sell your business in order to come up with the cash. So sometimes there are financial reasons that compel a seller to consider selling their business when they ordinarily would not want to.
I want to tell you my reason and tell me how common it is, right? So my reason is I think this business is doing well. I want it to keep running and to keep providing the value that it does. But personally, I want to switch a vehicle to a vehicle that can go faster and further.
So I think there are a lot of people that would like to sell a business in that scenario. Whether they can or not is very much an open question, right? If you one of the first questions a buyer's going to ask you is, why are you selling the business? To know that if you put yourself in the buyer's shoes and the answer comes back, well, my business isn't doing all that great, the market isn't there, I haven't been able to figure it out, the enthusiasm of the buyer is going to drop significantly.
Is there like a reason that you think someone shouldn't sell their business out of?
Yeah, actually.
Hey guys, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel, because if you subscribe, it's going to help the channel grow and the content to get better. So thank you very much.
I spend a lot of my time telling people not to sell their business, even though it talks me out of work. Again, because I think it's the right thing to do. Let's go back to the whole tire thing. If you have a business that is successful and you're tired, a lot of people don't consider the option of just hiring somebody to run it for them. At least in the American market. I can't speak to the European market yet. I haven't been here long enough. There are plenty of of very viable CEO candidates that are looking for a company to run. And they're willing to take equity upside as opposed to a big cash payment. And people think, I got to hire a CEO, so it's got to be someone that's being paid like Tim Cook. Like, no, most CEOs make between $200,000 and $300,000 a year plus some equity upside. And if you've got a business that's generating $10 million a year, you can handle that. If you hire the right CEO, it's going to make you more money. So I asked the owner, is there a role in the business you'd rather do? Maybe you're a tech person. You'd rather go back to writing code or running experiments down in a laboratory. Or maybe you just really like to sell and you just want to be on the road and take people out to $400 dinners so you can close the big deals. Maybe you like doing that, right? Whatever it is.
So when they get tired of the business, what is the alternative that they choose? Do they just close the business?
Well, no, the alternative is you sell it because you're tired.
Yeah.
Right? That's the alternative.
Right.
Sure, you can close it. And I know people that sadly decide to close it, I think, very prematurely. But again, I try to talk them out of that too. Right? If your business is at all viable, you can at least put it in caretaker mode. Right. Let's say that sudden closure usually happens because either there's been a catastrophic event in the owner's life, divorce, usually divorce or bad news on health. Okay, one of those two things. But even then, go to a recruiter, find somebody that can run your business for 6 months or so while you sell it, and at least get something for it if it's viable.
Great. We'll talk so much about it. So we're just, like I said, laying down the grounds, but we'll go deeper into that in the next questions. Why is it important to understand the value of my business at all times?
Because value is the ultimate scorecard. If you're a business owner, there's a very good chance that most of your wealth is tied up in the business. It's not in the stock market. It's not in real estate. It's not in Bitcoin. It's not in alpaca farms. It's in your business. And if you owned a lot of real estate, you would never just ignore the value of the real estate. If you owned a stock portfolio, you'd never just ignore your brokerage statements. If you don't understand the value of your business, then it's like getting into a car and driving in a random direction and hoping it takes you someplace good. Right? Try starting your GPS without the initial location of your vehicle. So I could give you anything. Right?
Explain the analogy. Why is it so?
Because if most of us want to sell a business with the goal of some sort of financial reward, getting rich, hopefully. Okay. But
Nothing wrong with that, right?
no, that's nothing. I mean, that's capitalism, right? They call it
Yep.
capitalism for a reason. It's about capital. Business is capital,
Yeah.
right? So the goal here is to get rich off the business. Well, if I don't know what my business is worth right now, one, maybe I'm already rich and I don't know it. Okay, and I've been in a lot of scenarios where somebody's been very surprised at how much value they actually have in their business today. Another reason is if the value of the business is not as high as you would like it to be or feel like you need it to be, you need to understand what's going to take you from what the value is today to what you'd like it to be 3, 5, 10, 20 years from now. So not only do you need to understand the value of the business, but you need to understand the underlying value thesis. Why is it the value that it is today? And why would somebody want to buy it 5, 10 years from now? And then your business plan is to figure out what do buyers want to buy, make my business look like that. If you don't know the value of the business, you don't know why the business exhibits the value it does, then you're basically just trying random things and hoping it works out.
Hey guys, if you like this video, please share it with a friend and help him reach the tipping point of his success as well. Thank you. So, what are the key factors of any business evaluation? I think on your website you talk about 3.
Yep. So I call it the magic valuation formula. It's cash flow or cash profits, if you will, growth, and risk. At the end of the day, any business has to generate cash or it has no value. It's not an income generating asset. Now, if you're in a business, say the technology world, then you may delay that cash gratification for a long time because there's going to be a really big pot of cash at the end of the rainbow, right? That's the venture capital model. But for most businesses, you need to be generating positive cash flow today. And the more cash you generate, the more valuable the business is.
I know it's very, very basic, but can you elaborate on that, on the
Sure.
on the cash flow, the equation, the cash flow and the value of the business?
Sure. Well, yeah, if we want to get a little mathy about it, which is great, I love mathing. So the equation is simply cash flow times 1 plus your growth rate divided by your required rate of return minus your growth rate, or otherwise known as the capitalization rate.
And now in
Okay.
English?
So cash flow is in the numerator. So as you increase cash flow, it's going to increase the value of your business. Okay. The G term is your growth. So it's great if you have cash flow that's stable. It's even better if it's actually growing on a fairly consistent basis, right? So if you give me a business with $1,000 a year cash flow and it's not growing, and one that has $1,000 of cash flow but it is growing, I want the one that's growing. I think fairly simple. Okay, you don't need to be a genius to figure that out. The denominator has this term, required return minus growth. That's also known as the capitalization rate. Required return is essentially a way that we use to express risk. The higher the risk of the company, the greater the required rate of return. For example, a target rate of return for a technology startup is probably going to be something in the 35 to 40% range because the failure rate is so high, there's so many unknowns. You may not even have fully identified the market. You may not have fully developed your product yet. Lots of risk there. I've even valued companies with a required rate of return as high as 100% a year because they were so risky. Conversely, a business that is relatively stable and solid may have a required rate of return of, say, 7% or 5%. Apple is a good example of that. If you back out the math for them, right, their cost of capital their cost of capital is roughly 5 or 6%. So if that number is in the denominator, the higher the risk, that's going to lower the value of the result, and so therefore the lower the value of the business. Now here's the kicker. because the risk value is in the denominator, you get a multiplier effect, right? If I increase cash flow by 10%, because on the numerator, my value goes up by 10%. If I decrease risk by 10% because of the denominator, my value goes up by 100%.
Wow.
So here's the thing.
But both, right? Like increase the profit and decrease the risk together.
If you do both, if you do both, then you've got a home run on your hands.
Wow.
Right? So people ask me a lot, what do I need to do to increase the value of my business? And they expect me to tell them, make more profits and grow. And I say, no. Figure out the risk points of your business and manage them. The rest will take care of itself. And it has far more impact, and you can control your risk much more than often you can control your profitability and growth.
Amazing. Okay, so now that we understand all these factors, can you repeat that formula again? Now that we understand it, please.
So value equals cash flow times 1 plus growth rate divided by your required return minus your growth rate. So if you can do 7th grade algebra, you can value a business.
All right. So what is the structural disadvantage?
So the two most important structural disadvantages that most businesses can fix with sufficient effort and a little investment is customer concentration. If you have a lot of your revenue tied up in one customer, at first it sounds great, but it's a sugar high. That's a major risk red flag that buyers are going to run from and can kill your business. Second is key person risk. In fact, I had a call with somebody in California yesterday. They're looking for some advice. And their biggest issue is that, or their biggest risk point is that they have one person that brings in 75% of the company's revenue.
One client.
Person. And I told the business owner something that floored him. I don't think he liked initially, but he got it. Is that you don't actually own the business. That salesperson does. Because that salesperson was not under a non-compete, didn't own any of the business.
Oh, the salesperson is bringing in 75% of the revenue of the company. I understand.
As an employee. And he's being paid well, he's been loyal, but at any point that guy could say, you know what, I could just walk out of here, take my contacts, start up a competing business, and I'm going to make all the money, and you're going to be left with nothing. So I told him, take care of that guy yesterday. Get him under a non-compete, give him a stay bonus, make him an offer for some equity, and as fast as you can, develop and hire more salespeople so that 75% of sales are not being generated by one person.
Feel free, Mike, throughout this interview, feel free to jump in with as many examples of that you want, because it's very important and it elaborates on the point and explains it really well. But let me ask you about the structural disadvantage of the seller and the buyer.
Sellers are the structural disadvantage to a buyer because most sellers have never sold a business before. Many buyers have bought many businesses before. In fact, if it's a private equity fund, that's literally all they do. Okay? So as a seller, you're entering into the most important transaction of your financial life. Could very well determine what your retirement looks like, what your financial legacy looks like. And you're taking a knife to a gunfight because the buyer, again, has done all these deals. They have all this data at their disposal. And the seller's just out there running their business. So the role of someone like me is to help the seller level the playing field, because I have done lots of deals through my lifetime. And somebody like me, again, doesn't have to be me. It could be either a transaction attorney, it could be the right CPA, it could be another valuation person. I don't want this to be the Mike Blake show.
But I think one of the key points that you're saying is just to know that, just to be aware of that when you're entering a deal as a first-time seller, you're entering a deal with a disadvantage because the buyer, or most of the buyers, or a lot of the buyers, majority of the buyers, have more experience in making these deals like that. So that alone should make you aware of the situation and now act accordingly, or go in aware of that when you're aware of that. It's very, very important. I mean, give me the first expression of this disadvantage that could happen.
Well, let me give you an example. One of my favorite projects a few years ago was a technology company in the Atlanta area. They received an offer to buy them for, I think it was about $35 million. And it was an attractive offer. They hadn't raised venture capital, so the owners got a chance. The owner could have taken home $35 million. They hired me to help them evaluate that offer. I came back and I said, I think this company's worth $70 million. So my client, to their immense credit, by the way, because they had an offer for $35 million sitting on the table, basically cash in the briefcase, turned it down. Decided, we're going to hold out for a better price. The same buyer came back 9 months later with an offer for $65 million. Now, because they knew the value of the business, right, they knew what their walking away point was. Now, $65 to $70 million, the client came back to me, should we take it? I said, hell yeah. For fun, you've already won $30 million. Holding out for the last 5 doesn't make any sense. Take the 65 and get the hell out of there.
Amazing. So the disadvantage was that they thought they're getting a great deal with the first offer of $35 million. 35 was it the first one?
Yep, 35.
They thought they're getting a great deal, but actually, because the buyer knew, because of his experience, that he's buying a $70 million business with $35 million, that was his advantage. And lucky for them, they met you, and you told them, hey, you should know you're worth twice as much. And by knowing that and waiting some time, they got the deal that they wanted. Amazing. All right. So in this next batch of questions, we're going to be answering the 10 most relevant and urgent questions that you guys wanted to know and get some practical advice from Mike about selling a business, maximizing value, and planning to exit. All right. So the first question is, what are the key factors that will increase the value of my business?
It's all about risk. You want to increase the value of your business quickly, is de-risk it. The 2 biggest risk factors one normally sees is key person. Too much of the value is wrapped up in one person, like the guy who accounts for 75% of sales. Often the key risk lies in the founder, but not always. And if you want a great example of key person risk, just look at Starbucks. Yeah, how many times did Howard Schultz retire and then have to come back and save the business, right? They couldn't. There's so much key person risk in that one person that it did enormous damage to that company.
But if I want to reduce the risk in my business, what's the go-to thing to do?
Make sure it's not overly dependent on one person.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And the second one, it's a very close second, so I got to mention it here, is customer concentration. If you've got a customer that accounts for more than 20% of the revenue of your business, you've got a problem. You've got to find a way to diversify it where your value is going to take a big hit.
Great. Okay, so the first thing is reduce the risk. What's the second thing?
Well, can I make risk 1 and 2? But the second thing is consistency. Consistent documented processes, consistent verifiable profitability. A lot of companies shoot themselves in the foot because they get cute.
Consistency and expectancy.
Yes.
Or one creates the other.
That's right.
Example?
So a great example is companies business owners that decide they're going to use the business as a way to shield themselves from taxes. Okay, so they run a lot of personal expenses through the business. So their tax return shows they've had no profit. Then the seller tries to tell a buyer, well, these numbers aren't real. I've just been lying to the Internal Revenue Service for the last 5-10 years. here are the real numbers if you take it out. And the owner thinks that the buyer's just going to be okay with that. But they're not. Number one, there may be residual liability after a sale that the IRS may come back to you, the business, to pay back taxes. But number two, buyers don't like dishonesty, even against the Internal Revenue Service. So if you're being told right off the bat you can't believe the most fundamental documents of the business, they're not going to believe the other documents either. You know, the way I look at taxes is if you have to pay taxes on your business, it's good news because it's profitable. Pay the taxes, have clean financials, because otherwise you can be very disappointed at the outcome later on.
Let's go back to the consistency point. How can I endorse consistency in my business?
Process. Lots of process. Document your process. Because it's not just about consistency day to day within the business, but it's also about consistency where the business is owned by me today and then by you tomorrow. And you've got to be able to step in and run that business. The best way to ensure that orderly transfer of power, if you will, is processes that you know what everybody should be doing. Everybody knows what they should be doing, and they are doing it. So in my business, one of the first things I focus on from a consistency standpoint is information intake. When I do a business valuation, I have to accumulate a lot of information. I have to learn a lot about a business in a short period of time. I can only do that if I have a fairly standard set of questions that I ask right off the bat. And so there's a standard set of questions I always ask, and that helps me compare the value of business one to the value of business two. And the second is quality control. Checklists. Before a work product goes out, there are checklists that I fill out by hand, right? Do the formulas match up? Has the data entry been correctly assessed? Have we paid enough attention to the qualitative information of the business? And so forth and so on, right? To make sure that mistakes don't come out. Because a small mistake at my end could be a multi-million-dollar swing in value, and that can be catastrophic to the success of the project.
Let's move on to some practical advice on what are the most common mistakes that make a business unsellable. How could those mistakes be avoided?
So I think the biggest mistake is to think that most businesses are valued on a multiple of revenue. That somebody's going to pay you 1-time sales, 2-time sales. And sometimes they do, but that's rare. And that's usually for high growth tech companies that are not profitable yet. That's a different value thesis. But most businesses need to be profitable before they are viable to be sold. And often what I see, what I hear about is a buyer has an unprofitable business. They don't know how to make it profitable, or more likely they're unwilling to make the changes in themselves required to make it profitable, and they decide they're going to sell it. And they basically are telling the buyer, I wasn't able to make this profitable, but you look like you're smarter, more energetic than I am, so you're going to have more success. So pay me for the success you're going to build. And the buyer says, no effing way, right? I'm not going to pay you so that I can create the success you failed to make.
Sorry, there are people that will argue at this point with giving examples like Amazon and Tesla that have been unprofitable for years, but you can't say that they don't have value.
So those are the exceptions. So the value thesis of the Teslas and the Amazons of the world pre-profit is that they're grabbing market share. Okay, so Amazon was a big land grab for market share to the point where I would argue in many sectors of the economy they're effectively a monopoly. Tesla is a big brand, is the most important brand name in electric vehicles. Okay.
So they had profit, but it was in the form of reputation and brand and moat, and not, and even if the numbers didn't say profit margin. You argue that they had a lot because of the monopoly, because of the brand, it compensated on the lack of profit. That was the worth.
And in the case of Elon Musk, I think he as the executive, prior to buying Twitter, he had the reputation that anything he touched would turn to gold, right? And so people made a bet on Elon Musk. So if you're Elon Musk, yeah, go ahead. But most companies don't have an Elon Musk.
Right. Hey guys, if you have any questions about the content you just watched, please leave a comment below the video and I promise I will address each and every one of them personally. So going back to the point of the mistake is thinking like I can offer my business without showing profit. Do I need to show like extended period of time of profit, like is such and such years, 3 years or more of consistent profit, growing profit?
So this gets into the consistency discussion. Consistent profit is far more compelling than losing money for 10 years and making a profit the last year, right? So Missouri in the United States is called the show me state. So a lot of people say I'm from Missouri. I'm not going to buy the company now. I'm going to watch it for a year and see if you can do it again. If you can do it again, then I'm willing to have a conversation.
Interesting. Any other common mistakes that could make a business unsellable that I as a seller should be aware of?
Yeah, it's not preparing for the sale in advance.
We're going to be talking about that. All right. So let's address the main issue that a business owner have on their minds when thinking about planning or a sale, which is how can I maximize the business value and get the best price when selling?
So you'll always get the best price, almost always get the best price at auction. So ideally you want more than one buyer bidding on your business. And this is where I get into the investment banker role and why I was so careful to point out how important that they are. The job of the investment banker is to sell your business. They're a broker. They don't like to call themselves brokers, but that's what they are. And ideally, they want to get multiple buyers to the table that will bid against each other. How do you get them to bid against each other? Have a high quality business that addresses some of the issues we've talked about already. But almost always there's a lot of value in bringing an investment banker to the table to help sell your business and make the market. You want a lot of buyers banging on your door, private equity funds, strategic buyers, individual investors.
The investment banker is one of the ways to get to those buyers, right?
Yep, that's right.
What other ways?
So an often overlooked way is to sell your business to your employees. Your employees already know about the business. Chances are they believe in the business, particularly if you don't have a lot of turnover. And at least in the United States, there's a lot of debt financing available for employee-based buyouts. And so when you're buying a company with debt, generally speaking, you can justify a higher valuation because the cost of capital is lower for debt financing than it is for private equity. Your cost of capital is going to be 8% as opposed to 25 or 30%. So on that basis alone, you can justify a value that's potentially 2 to 3 times higher. So often your employees may be in a position to buy your business out. And that also will often lead to a shortcut in the due diligence process because they already know everything about the business or most things about the business.
Okay, so to maximize the business value and get the best price for selling, get as many buyers as you can, bidding at the same time. Anything else?
Yeah, one other thing is pay attention to the terms of the deal. Okay? So some companies, some businesses are bought by somebody showing up and paying 100% cash. That's rare. Okay? Most business acquisitions have terms. And those terms cover things from employment agreements with the buyer to earnouts to what's called seller financing, meaning that you get to pay the seller back over time. They basically provide you some of the funds to buy the business. And a mentor of mine years ago once said, "I'll give you any price you want as long as I get to name the terms." And that has stuck with me. They said that to me like 15 years ago. It stuck with me. And she's absolutely right. If I get the right terms, the price is going to take care of itself. So if you want to get the highest price,
because the terms could be worth money to me.
very much so, because the terms of price are dancing partners. So let me give a more concrete example. I might be willing to pay you $5 million for your business cash, because that's all I've got to spend. Okay. But if you're willing to de-risk the business by coming to work for me for 18 months, and you're willing to provide what we call seller financing, meaning that I can pay you back for part of the purchase price over 3 years, now I can justify paying $8 million. Nothing about the business changed. The value didn't change, simply the terms of sale. So if you can be flexible in the terms of sale, you can generate a higher price for yourself on that basis alone. And that's where a good business attorney and somebody like me can really earn their money.
Wow. So you coined like two factors in, which is the terms of the financing, right?
Yep.
And the risk, bringing down the risk with offering to stay in the business for a period of time for the buyer.
That's right.
Any other things we should be aware of, like right off the bat?
Yeah. So one other term is called an earnout. They're sometimes called contingent consideration. What that means is that after the business is sold, the better the business performs, the more you get paid. Right. So an earnout might say that if the business generates an additional $5 million of revenue in the next year, then I get paid an extra $500,000. Now, a lot of people will tell you, don't assume you'll never hit the earnout because the buyer will always find a way to screw you. I think that's a little too cynical. I've actually seen many earnouts work well to the benefit of both the buyer and the seller.
It sounds a little bit to me like staying a partner, staying like a silent partner in the business for a little while longer, isn't it?
Yeah. Now, look, some sellers are just done, right? They don't want to. They want to drop off the keys and retire to Portugal, right?
Yeah.
And again, there's a price for that. It's going to be less, but there's a price for that.
Right. Interesting. Very, very interesting. What is the Goldilocks zone? Who coined that? Is it yours?
Yeah. Well, so the Goldilocks zone is I generally use for capital raising, but other people use it in a lot of different ways. But of course, Goldilocks refers to the Goldilocks, the three bears, and one porridge is too cold, one is too hot, one is just right. So be just right. And the way I use the Goldilocks zone is for people who are raising capital, which means you're selling part of your business. You're selling stock in your business. And there's a Goldilocks zone for every kind of investor of how much capital they are comfortable putting into a business. Okay. So angel investors are going to be comfortable putting in, depending on the investor and what part of the world you're in, between $50,000 and $1 million. That's their Goldilocks zone. If you try to raise less than that, it's too small. They don't want to do it. If it's more than that, then they're tapped out. They can't afford to do it. Venture capital is going to be at least $2 million up to $5, maybe $10 million. Right? That's their Goldilocks zone. But if you need more than $10 million, you're outside their Goldilocks zone. And you may need to move up to private equity, mezzanine finance, something like that. And then if you need to raise $1 billion, that's the Goldilocks zone for going public, right? That's rarely going to be a private equity deal. It could be if it's really one of the big guys. So the going, and that's all about knowing your audience and knowing the state of your business. And where businesses get into trouble, this is why the Goldilocks zone is relevant. They get into trouble because they want to raise too much money too early. And they do that because they want to raise money once and hopefully never have to do it again. And I get it. Raising money sucks. It's a lot of talking, a lot of rejection. It's a lot of kissing frogs, meaning you're talking to people who say they're investors, but they're really not. It's a lot of trying to patiently explain your business concept to people who don't understand, never will understand. It can be time consuming, it is energy using, and can be soul crushing. But when you try to raise too much capital, you're going to be doing it at a lower valuation. You're going to be selling more of the company than you should. And you're going to find fewer investors that have an appetite to provide that much capital to a company at a very early stage. So I advise almost every client, raise exactly the amount that you need now and be prepared to go out to the market later. Raise the money, kick ass. After you kicked ass, you raise your valuation, go back to the market, and rinse and repeat as often as you need to. Because if you're a CEO, that's your job description. And this is more of a negotiation discussion. Which I'm happy to have. So one of the goals of negotiation is to if you're the seller, is name a price that's high, because you know it's not going any higher than that. Right? Nobody's going to say, "Oh, you're asking for too little. You're asking for $10 million. I want to give you 12." That's never going to happen. So you want to ask for as high as you can, the sweet spot. You want to ask for as much as you can without scaring the investor away, right? And then you know you've screwed up if you name a number and the investor or the buyer says, "Okay," right away, right? You said a price that was too low. In fact, I've had a lot of arguments with real estate brokers. I hate it when I say this, but I think I'm right there wrong. They'll send out these newsletters and announcements saying, "We helped this client sell their home in 1 day." 1 day. I mean, how many? You didn't give it enough market exposure time. If you sold my home in 1 day, I'm like, go back and work harder, get more buyers, right? We set our price too low. And if you get the same thing for your business again, if somebody says, "Don't get off the phone," I'm thinking, "Oh, crap, I've left millions of dollars on the table," right? So that's why. So it's and once you name that low price, you can never increase it. You're stuck. Whereas you can always give a little bit on the price if you set it too high.
How can I avoid that mistake? How can I avoid both of those mistakes?
Best way to avoid that is to have an independent valuation done in your business. Have somebody come in that's going to study your business, that is independent, that says, "I don't care if you sell your business or not, I get paid the same way." And this kind of gets into a trick. Why not have the investment banker do the business valuation? First of all, they will. But the investment banker's incentive, I'm not saying that they all do this, but they will admit this is the incentive, is to figure out what is the lowest price you'll accept for your business, right? They're not incentivized to potentially jeopardize their fee to hold out for a 5% higher price. They're just not. Sell the business, take your fee, get out of there. As opposed to an independent valuation where I'm getting paid either way. So this is the number, right? And in many cases, my client will use that as a way to kind of keep their investment banker working hard. Say, "I appreciate the offer that you got, but this independent valuation says I ought to be able to get 20% more. So I'd like you to work a little bit harder, go out to the market and bring more buyers to the table." If you don't have that valuation, you can't have that conversation with any level of credibility.
I think in the real estate, it's like that as well. For example, like you have a real estate agent that all he wants is to get the deal off the table, get his fee. Or if you had just someone that you pay him by the day or the week or the month or by the amount of bids he provides to you, then you'd probably get the better price of the deal.
And that's why I tell people that when an investment banker asks for a retainer, in addition to the success fee, that's a good thing. Because if all you get is a success fee, the banker is only going to work on the deal that's closest to being done. And if you fire him, well, they don't care because you're not making him any money anyway. But if you're paying him $5,000 to $10,000 a month, to keep working on the deal, you're going to get a lot more attention because they don't want that retainer to go away. And it's enough to keep them interested until you get to that sale.
Understood. Good. I like that. Let's talk about one of the sexiest words in the world of business, which is exit. How should I prepare for an exit to ensure that I get the best possible outcome?
Two things. One is to prepare for an exit. You know, it's remarkable how many business people don't prepare for an exit. They'll prepare their house for a sale, right? They'll fix up the kitchen and mow the lawn and put some plants in and stuff, but they won't do it with their business. And the business is usually 10 times more valuable or 100 times more valuable. So prepare, and the more time you give yourself to prepare, the better and more impactful will be that preparation. So I'd say at least a year, ideally 5 years to prepare for the business, because some of those things we talk about take time to implement.
So even way before I even plan to sell or think about it, what does that process look like?
So I think ideally the process actually is a written plan. And there are people out there who actually provide coaching services to make sure that you're adhering to that plan. I do that a little bit, but I know people who do that full time. So I'll help a client develop a plan. What is it going to take to maximize the value of an exit? Here's what we need to do in the next 5 years. Okay, what does that look like in year one? What does that look like in the first quarter? What does that look like in the first month, in the first week? And then move along, do weekly check-ins, week to week to week. Are we making progress? And now we talked about getting the valuation for the business. We'll come back and update the value of the business in a year to see how much progress you've made or not, because either way is important to know. So the process of planning for the exit is, a plan.
It's a plan. It's a plan basically to show consistency. It's a plan to show increasing, growing cash flow. It's a plan to show that that the business could grow after you leave, and it's not dependent on you as a CEO. Stuff like that.
That's right. Yeah, to de-risk it. And again, because some of these things you can't just wave a magic wand and make go away overnight. You can't just eliminate the key person risk overnight. You can't just eliminate the concentrated customer list or risk overnight. It can take a long time.
It sounds to me that if you go on and make the plan like an exit plan from day one, that will probably make sure you're going to succeed in the business. Like having that in mind from day one is probably going to increase the chances of you doing things right.
I think so, because it gives you a direction and it gives you a touch point or a context for all the decisions you make on the micro level to align to something on the macro level. And creating a business plan isn't hard. It really isn't. As long as you take the following approach, which is find out what my business needs to look like in 5 years to be sold. And then everything I do is about making my business look like that.
Can you talk about the mental side of preparing to part with your business?
Yeah. So I think the mental side, the mental side is really one very simple thing that's also one of the hardest things to do.
I can tell you that for me, it was like 6 months or even a year of stress and just, dabbling and thinking about this scenario. Oh, what if I'm wrong? What if I'm doing the wrong thing? It's always that. Or, oh, what am I doing that I'm staying? Or what am I doing that I'm not selling?
So, I think and this actually touches on your kind of description of your anxiety in that regard. I think the most important mental posture for preparing your business to sell is a willingness to embrace change. If you're the owner of the business and it's not doing as well as you would like or as it needs to be sellable, as the owner, one way or the other, it's your fault. Full stop. The good news is that that's actually good news. When it's your fault, you can stop doing the things that make your business underperform, right? And we all have weaknesses, right? You can stop ignoring your monthly P&L reports. You can stop tolerating bad behavior by your employees. You can stop overcompensating salespeople for basically just taking orders or selling products to existing customers, right? You can stop taking money out of the business instead of investing it. You can stop failing to delegate and developing bench strength so that it's no longer so dependent upon you. So you can change. If there's one superpower that anybody can develop to maximize the value of their business, it's the power of self-change.
I thought you mean the power of self-change is to prepare yourself to have a changed life after selling the business, or trying to imagine how your life would be like after you make the sale. Maybe trying that for a while not selling the business, or before you do that.
That is what creates the motivation for the self-change. Self-change is hard. The older we get, the more difficult it becomes, right? I am no longer a viable employee for any company. And the reason for that is because I've had success as an entrepreneur. And now I think I know everything. And I would be a disaster working for somebody else. And I know that. And the world knows that. Nobody's offered me a job I don't want. But my business teaches me every day that I don't know everything and I need to change. But a lot of people really struggle with that. But what motivates that change, to your point, is where I want my business to be 5-10 years from now. And where I want my business 5-10 years from now is I want it to be one of the most important boutique strategic consulting and business valuation businesses in the European Union, which means I have to change a lot and still change to make that happen. And it's painful. But every time I change, something good happens.
Amazing. So embracing change and getting that in your mind. So the next question is, what's the approach to negotiating a business sale? And how do I get the other side on board with the terms?
So I think negotiation comes down to two things. Comes down to asymmetry of information. Who knows more about the business and the market? And then what your walk-away point is, okay? If you don't have a walk-away point, we talked a little bit earlier about businesses that are forced to sell, they don't have a walk-away point. You're not negotiating at that point. You're just asking and hoping that somebody buys your business. So this is why developing the right kind of business is important, because it gives you the power to walk away. If you can't walk away, you cannot negotiate. Okay. Second, it bears repeating. If you're not getting the price you want, then negotiate on the terms. Right? If you're not winning on one battlefield, change the battlefield. Third is don't turn the negotiation into something that's overly adversarial. Yes, you and the buyer are both trying for the same thing, but it doesn't have to be overly adversarial. If you ever have to raise your voice in a negotiation, I think you've lost. In fact, when I'm helping somebody negotiate and they raise their voice, I already know I'm going to win, because that tells me they're scared. And when people are scared, they make lousy decisions and they're subject to manipulation. And unfortunately, I'm very good at that. So maintaining your calm, always being the adult in the room, no matter how badly you think things are going for you, in the end, always serves you extremely well.
I want the other side to to come to the negotiation table and immediately feel that he's in a safe environment?
My mantra in that case is the buyer and I want the same thing. We both want them to own the business after the end of the negotiation. It's just a matter of figuring that out. Now, as a corollary to that, I think a growth mindset versus a scarcity mindset is so important. When you have a scarcity mindset, you feel like this is the only person or only company that's ever going to want to buy my business, so I have to make this deal work. And that creates a lot of stress, and that leads to potential emotional breakdowns. With a growth mindset, you say, I'd love to sell it to these people, but if they're unable to see the value that I see in the business, I'm simply going to move on to somebody who does see the value of the business. I'm going to have a more constructive conversation.
Next question is about timing. Let's talk about timing. When is the perfect time, if there is such a thing, to sell a business, and how do I know when it comes? How do I know I'm ready?
Well, so I think the best time to sell your business is when you're just as happy running the business and owning it as you would be to not have the business and take the money off the table. That's the best sort of balance, because again, that empowers you to walk away. Also, that probably means that you have a good business to sell, right? If you're happy running it, it's making you a lot of money. That's a good story, right? And maybe I don't even have to be in it full time. Maybe I'm only doing it 15, 20 hours a week, and I'm only doing the parts of it that I happen to like and really get me excited in the morning.
Of people that how many examples of that situation did you encounter in your lifetime? You did more than like 400 evaluations, right?
Yeah, something like that.
Of those 400 evaluations, how many decided to sell at that point?
Yeah, I'd say less than 5%. But again, the question was, what is the ideal time? Ideal time, right? But now let me expand on that. I'm going to answer the question a little bit differently, but I think it gets there. And that is that you should count on taking a year from the time you want to sell your business to the time you actually get cash for it. It takes that long to do. It takes that long to find buyers. It takes that long to go down negotiations with buyers. Some of them drop off. You start new ones. The legal documentation alone takes 2 months to do, at least in the United States. And so, if you think you're ready, you'd be ready to sell in a year. That's the time to start preparing. Give yourself a year of lead time.
And again, have that mindset of being exit ready, just so that you can say that you're maybe was one of those 5% who sold their business at the right time.
Yep.
They should teach that at business school, right?
Yeah.
The exit ready.
Yeah.
Do they do that? I don't know. I don't think so.
It's hard to do, but it can be done. But look, if it were easy to do, everybody would do it. And that's my job, is when people want to help them do that.
Let's talk about pitfalls. What are the main pitfalls that break a deal? If you can share an example, and how I can avoid them.
2 big pitfalls. One big pitfall is inflexibility, not listening to the concerns of the buyer. The buyer often will have legitimate concerns about the business. Some people think you can steamroll that and simply dismiss them. I think that's a mistake. That usually results in not only a non-deal, but a bad reputation as well, because you come off as unrealistic. The second pitfall that doesn't get talked about enough is that selling a business can become a second full-time job. And one of the most unfortunate potential pitfalls of selling a business is that you spend so much effort and attention on selling the business that you forget to run it. And the business declines while you're actually selling it. And that scares the hell out of a buyer, right? And the buyer has every right to walk away and say, well, look, we started this conversation 90 days ago. I thought I was buying this. But now you've been thinking about retiring to Tahiti or whatever, and you stopped showing up to work and the business has declined. It's just not worth what it was worth 90 days ago. I'm sorry. But that happens a lot, which is why, one reason why bringing in advisors can be so helpful, to make sure that you're still focused on running the business. Just like in a race, you run through the tape. You don't slow down. You're running for the Olympic gold medal. You don't slow down the last few steps before you hit the tape.
All right. Let's talk about another thing I've never heard about before I researched for this interview, which is seller finance. And the question is, I want to sell my business. I like the buyer that I have. Maybe it's an employee of mine. And he wants to buy, but he lacks the upfront cash. What can I offer him?
Yeah, so, most businesses do not sell for 100% cash buyout. Think about when you buy a car, right? And you buy a car, and often the dealer will offer to arrange financing for you. And what they're very good at is they take your eye off of what is the price of the car and what is your monthly payment. So it becomes, what can you afford the monthly payment? Now, a lot of people wind up buying much more car than they want or need because the conversation is shifted to that monthly payment. The same principle applies in a business sale. So as a seller, when you offer financing, in exchange for the fact that you're making it easier to buy the business, you can justify attracting a higher valuation. And you're getting the buyer to focus not on the price anymore, but can the business generate the cash to pay it back?
So again, getting to that point of selling the business when I'm not yet fed up with it, and have no problem of, like, let's say I have a problem, but I'm also comfortable with the factor of maybe getting it back, or staying the owner for a little bit, makes it more profitable for me, and more eligible for this kind of offer. Great.
That's right.
All right. So let's talk about, how do I assess risks involved in selling my business? What risk I could potentially be exposing myself to, and should take that as a sign to run away from the table.
So I think that every seller should check the reputation of the buyer. And if they've bought other businesses before, like it's a private equity firm, you should check the references. You should call other firms that the private equity fund has bought and talk to their owners, right? Now that you're in the private equity ecosystem, how do you like being in it? Have they helped you grow the business? Are they good coaches? Are they micromanagers?
Why? Why is it important?
What's this?
Why is it so important to do that?
So it's important because many times, in order to sell the business, you have to agree to stay in the business for a year. And they either won't buy the business unless you agree to do that, or they'll hold back a big part of the purchase price until you meet your employment obligation. So before you do that, find out if that's a good thing, if they're going to be a good teammate. And the way to really find that out is to talk to other people whom they've purchased.
Because you can find yourself in a nightmare job.
That's right. That's right. Second, what's their reputation generally? Do they tend to litigate after an acquisition? Right? Are they the kind of company that, for the slightest thing they find wrong after the acquisition, they come back and say, you said you had 50 paper clips and we only found 40 in the office, so you want $1 million back, right? Are they the kind of company that does that? You only find that out through the reputation. What is their reputation in terms of paying for businesses? Some businesses only buy if they can get the lowest price, and they're gonna beat you down to the lowest price possible, or the Warren Buffett effect, right? Do you want that kind of buyer? Do they pursue negotiations in a civilized way, or do they spend the entire time talking about what a piece of shit the business is and how lucky you are they're even talking to you, right? Maybe you don't want to deal with people like that. There are some businesses that, as a negotiating tactic, will try to drag negotiations as long as possible to exhaust you. Maybe to weaken the business, but just to exhaust you mentally. Here's one. Unfortunately, a common tactic by big tech is they will enter into some sort of agreement with you, look at your technology, walk away from the deal, and then copy it and say, you know what? Sue us. We've got 50 in-house counsel, and we've also got the finest law firm in Silicon Valley on speed dial, and you've got Joe Blow, the country attorney. Go ahead and sue us, right? Understand that. Understand.
So even if you come with these contract of confidentiality and trying to protect your
contracts only go so far, though. If you can't afford to enforce them, they don't matter. And some companies play hardball in that regard. Here's an anecdote I saw about Apple buying a company of Steve Jobs. Apple had negotiated a purchase price for a company. I think it was about $300 million. And they were selling on the Apple platform. And the way the seller tells it, Steve Jobs came in to negotiate the final deal. He says, there's no way this company's worth $300 million. You're going to take $150 million. And he says, wait a minute, your guy said $300 million. It's right there in the paper. I said, I know. I'm going to pay $150 million. If you don't sell, and if you sue me, I'm going to kick you off the Apple platform, and you're going to be out of business in 30 days. What do you want to do? Okay? Before you even enter that discussion, right, you want to know that reputation and how are you going to handle it. And that's one story I've heard. That is not a unique story. Big tech throws elbows.
Big round.
Yeah, and realize due diligence is a two-way street. Just as the buyer's doing due diligence on you as a seller should go the other way. Know who you're dealing with. And you may decide you don't want to deal with them. You don't want to sell to them.
Is there like a due diligence checklist for me as a seller?
So that's a good point. I think you just gave me an idea for a something to put on my website. But I will say this: to prepare for due diligence, there's a book called Due Diligence Analysis and Techniques by a guy named Gordon Bing, which is my Bible. It's basically lists of questions that every buyer should be asking about a potential target. And I advise my clients to look through that and make sure they're prepared for every one of those questions. If you do that, you're going to do well.
So if you do that, it's also, it works the other way around.
That's right.
You're preparing for your questions, but you're also finding out details about the buyer and reduce the risk and protect yourself from the risk that could occur. Amazing. And don't forget to give me credit when you make that video.
I'll make sure.
I'm kidding. All right. So getting to the final question, I think, or one or two final questions is, of course, how to identify and find or attract my ideal buyer.
So, again, I'm a big fan of using investment bankers and business brokers for a few reasons. Number one, they already have a Rolodex of potential buyers. And number two, they can sell your company confidentially, because one of the things you don't want to do, I guess it gets back into the prior question. What risk of selling your business is that if it gets out that your business is for sale, that can spook customers and it can spook employees.
Right. I think a lot of people are afraid to say that because they're afraid their customers would get spooked. So how do you reconcile that?
So the way you reconcile it, ideally, is you hire an investment banker. The investment banker will send out a memorandum containing the information about your company to potential buyers, but they won't send out the name of the company. Once there are buyers, then they'll lock them up through some sort of non-disclosure, confidentiality, non-circumvention agreement, and only then will the name of the company be identified.
What if you want to do it more privately? You don't want to go to an investment banker. You want to maybe, I don't know, maybe the business is not that big of a deal. Maybe it's still a couple $1 million or so, and you want to sell it to someone, and you want to do it like more privately.
You tell potential buyers, I'm thinking of selling my business. Not I'm going to sell my business, I'm thinking of selling my business. And I'm not exactly sure when that's going to be or what that's going to look like, but if that's of interest to you, I'll make sure you know when I make that decision.
Very, very smart.
And that gives you at least initial indications of interest, and you have plausible deniability. Right, so he says, "You're selling it." I said, "No, I'm thinking about selling it."
So even if that word gets out to your customers, that won't spook them because you're thinking about selling it. You don't have a reason to sell it now.
Right.
It's something that could or could not happen in the future. But how do you get to those potential buyers if not through an investment banker?
Well, so how do you get to your potential? Well, so let's take classes of potential buyers. If the potential buyer may be a competitor, in which case you likely already know them. You see them at trade shows, chambers of commerce, whatever. That's easy.
So you approach him directly.
Yeah.
With your intentions. Mm-hmm.
That's right. If not through a business broker, then directly.
Sure.
And again, you just say, look, I'm just thinking about it. Don't say I'm going to, just thinking about it. Second is, you can approach private equity funds. And if you have a good business to sell, private equity funds are always looking for great opportunities. You can research private equity funds. You can understand what it is they buy, see if your business meets their profile, and then reach out to them.
So we talked about just looking at your competitors, private equity fund. What else?
Third way is social media. A lot of private equity people are out on social media, and they're out there because they're hoping you're going to come to them with deal flow. Okay? So be aware of that. And then finally, work through your other professional advisors. Chances are your accountant, your law firm, your personal financial advisor, other consultants know potential buyers, and they can make introductions to you.
Amazing. Let's go back one step. Let's go one step back to social media. What do I write on my post?
You don't write anything. What you do is you find the private equity people and you follow them.
Right.
And you start to comment.
It's not that you promote on social media and say, hey, I want to sell. No, you wouldn't do that. You find the potential buyers.
You wouldn't do that. What you do is you engage with those people on social media and then connect with them, send them a direct message saying, hey, it looks like my business is a profile that matches what you guys buy. I'm thinking of selling. Are you interested?
And I can do that with a competitor as well.
Yep.
That's great. All right. I feel like that we have much better understanding about evaluating a business and also some tools and strategies to prepare, plan, and negotiate a great deal, an exit plan. But we're not finished yet. So how can someone learn more about you, about your company, your services, in case they they want your advice, they want your guidance, they want your involvement in the deal, in the process, or they're looking to they heard us And they say, okay, I want to evaluate my business. I want to know how much it's worth. I understand that it's important for my business.
Yeah, so I'm not hard to find. Yeah, on LinkedIn, my handle is unbreakable. That's also my handle on Threads and Instagram. My own YouTube channel is called Your Business Value. So you can reach me through there. And our website is simply highscorestrategies.com.
Amazing. So we'll have all those links in the description of the video. And lastly, this podcast name is The Tipping Point of Success. I don't want to be explaining that to you. I want to be asking you, what does reaching the tipping point of success mean to you personally? It's a question I'm asking every guest.
Yeah, I think the tipping point of success is where you're controlling how your life unfolds, and you have command over what it takes you to be happy in your life, and then you have the power to make that happen.
I think it's the best answer I've ever got.
Wow.
Thank you very much, Mike. It was a pleasure. I appreciate it. I've learned so much, and you have a great way of explaining those sometimes difficult concepts. You explain them amazingly.
Thank Cordelia for that. She's trained me to say if I can't explain it to an 8th grader, then I need to simplify it. So
I will thank her when I see her.
Okay. See you.
Hey guys, if you like that, go check out the next interview that's going to help you reach the tipping point of your success.